Croeso I cyfarfod hon. Good morning everyone and welcome to this meeting of the Audit Committee of HEIW. I have a few additional welcomes today. I believe we are Tristan Pritchard is joining us, the Assistant Director of Strategic Partnership Engagement and Insight, joining us online. Joining us in person is Helen Watkins, Director of Workforce and Organisational Development, who is also observing the meeting. And in due course, Ricky Cartland, Head of Cybersecurity and Information Assurance, will be joining us to present an item. So, with no more ado, let's move on. Any apologies for absence? No? Any declarations of interest relating to matters on the agenda today which have not been previously declared? The draft minutes of our last meeting on the October, was a long time ago, are in the pack, and I know that colleagues will have read them. Are there any matters of accuracy? Let us move then to the action log from the meeting held on the 10th of October. David? Which admin control stops responding.
So all actions have been completed.
So going back to the minutes, are there any other matters arising from the minutes of the October meeting which members wish to raise? Thank you. So, with no more ado, let us move on to part 2, matters for consideration, and hand over to Paul for the internal audit speech.
Thank you, Chair. So I'll just take the progress report first of all and take it as read. Just to throw out one or two things. The performance measures are 801. They can see that they are all positive, and so good responses and turnaround times for the reports. As you can see, in terms of the questionnaires that we issue, when we complete our reviews, we ask feedback for the people we've engaged with. We're getting good returns on those as well, which is good to see as well. And then finally to table 2, which has the detailed progress in the plan. Good progress. I think we'd quite like to have got the single employer reports to this committee, but it's still stuck through that review process at the moment, so that will be in the agenda for next time. Just one other minor update on the table is that the duty of quality work has now started. Used to actually get going forward to 2025.
That's really good progress. Any comments, questions on that?
Sure. Can I just ask for my benefit more than anything, I guess, in terms of the plan for either last year or the plan for next year, in terms of the prioritization of which audit is in Q1, Q2, Q3. So what assumptions are used in order to inform that prioritization, and how do we go about it?
So that's part of the dialogue when we're putting together the plan at the start of the year. So there's parts of this process. As part of the process, we speak with the executive team and sort of work out what's best timing for them. So we start with the launch if we like the freedom to work out what is the best time, and then sometimes things move around. Priorities change from the year, so it might be that. So we keep a little bit flexible in the system, but generally it's that decision process.
And I presume that that's informed then by risk of the areas. and they would be prioritised if it's perceived as a higher risk.
Yeah, it could be. It could be part of the conversation as well. Yeah, but sometimes it's also the time of the work. So, for example, if it's finance, we might do the sort of theoretically quieter time of the year. So
From the two new audits we put into this year, they are both going to be completed. And so the single lead employer one that you've already covered, the payment for placement expenses, that's going to be completed at our next meeting.
that's what we're aiming for.
That's how we draft at the moment.
Yeah. Yeah, and the final one that was added to the plan, if you like, or changed was the annual review of progress. And that is, we've had a scope meeting on that one, so that should be probably starting pretty soon. So
There's a draft brief out for that room this week, so let's get that started.
So, shall we move on to the draft plan for coming year?
So the group space plan for 25-26, as it is in previous years, so that involves our discussion with members and the executive team, thinking about the risk registers within the organisation, and a number of different things fall into the sort of planning progress process. Just one of the things from the plan. Section 2 sets out the overall approach that we take and draws out the discussions that we have and sets out with buying and aligning with the global internal standards, which I spoke about at the last committee, which are the new standards effective from accepted from the 1st of April this year. And then moving down into section appendix A, which then sets out the detail for the proposed plan for 25-26. That's been pulled together through discussion with members of the organisation. And then appendix B sets out the performance measures that we are looking to agree this year, which are similar in nature to the ones for 24-25. They're quite challenging, certainly from our point of view, when we're looking for to turn reports around within 95% of reports within 10 days. So it's quite a challenge in that respect, but we've managed to meet that this year, so we've continued in that vein. And then the third part of the plan document then is the charter, the mandated charter, which then sets out the relationship between ourselves and the organisation. A lot of sort of granular detail about how that relationship works in the reporting cycle, and how we address issues if we disagree, and the sort of mechanics of the day-to-day operation. So then today we're looking to get the committee to approve the plan, approve the mandate and charter, and then to note the performance measures set out in appendix B.
Colleagues, any questions, comments?
The only observation is that I was pleased to see that previous discussions that we had with team have been reflected in the proposed plan. So I think that from our perspective, that's welcomed.
Really comprehensive document.
Yeah.
I think you've talked about the levels of engagement, which have been really good, and I actually think it's really good explanatory documents as well, in terms of the mandate and contract. So colleagues, we are prepared to approve.
Yep.
Thank you. And then the reports, please, Paul.
So I'm going to Emma for talk through the reports.
So the first one is in relation to information governance, and got to admit this was done by our specialist IT team, so if there's any technical questions, I might have to take those away and come back to you with answers, but hopefully the report is self-explanatory. And the aim of the audit was looking at the resourcing capacity and resilience in the LG function in order to achieve the compliance with DP regulation and legislation. So overall, substantial assurance. Report, there's quite a lot of good practice that's been picked up within the team in terms of the digital data strategy with IG as a key mission. The IG team in place to support compliance in terms of GDPR and processing data such as damage requests, etc. There is one recommendation in the report, and that relates to the resilience within that team to manage FOI requests. And the concern being that there's 2 key staff, each with the skills to do it, but if one wants to be away, then there's obviously then to process those requests as timely as required. So that was our key finding, which management accepted. You also note in the exec summary of the report, there's a couple of bullet points around areas for potential improvement. So there's suggestions that have been affected the report. I wasn't planning on saying more on that, unless there's any questions, but so much to say.
Questions?
I think the important thing is when you sort of assurance, I'm sorry, I'm just over a little notes on my phone as well, so to objective to, I understand that's reasonable. After the conducting of the review, is it given that there'll be a formal outcome report outlining any key findings, recommendations, and proposed actions?
So all the recommendations from our report go through to the tracker, which is then presented most through, and then which then gives the updates to how management have done in progressing those actions to the point that they're closed. It's monitored through that. If it was limited assurance report, we would then schedule in a follow-up and actually plan and do an audit of those recommendations in more detail, because it's substantial. Routine use of that it would be managed. Is that answer the question?
Yeah, it's just that reassurance piece, because I note that it is a reasonable request, so it's not sort of that limited assurance. I just wondered if that was the process, because I didn't get that impression reading the monitoring action.
Chair, thank you. So there was one part of the report that I did feel uncomfortable about when you did raise it, and that was about the resilience in the team with regards to deal with treated information, etc. And I noted in objective 2. However, when we look at the management response to that, it just says we will review options for capacity and resilience. Now, to me, this is a bit of a risk here. And the timing of that is the 11th of November 2024. So I guess my question is, how is it that we're going to be mitigating the risk other than just a review? And in November, well, to me, this is quite a significant issue, unless I'm interpreting it wrong.
So there were 2 questions with regards to, sorry, so there was a part around the track, so just we take the track at every quarterly meeting or committee. With regards to John's specific query here, as we understood the IGIM report, was a specific concern around our ability to, when we received an FOI or this protection request, our ability to be able to go through emails using software to identify softwares that would be the subject matter of the FOI. So currently within the organisation, we've got 2 individuals who are able to undertake that work. But however, we are also able to access DHCW. I have had discussions with Ricky on people can use the software within the organisation. And what we're going to do is we're going to train more individuals within the organisation to be able to use this software. So we are expecting to do that next months with regards to that specific area.
Well, that does give assurance. So I think perhaps the narrative then in terms of the agreed management action, what Gabby says is fine with me, absolutely. If that's more than review, if you've got things.
We can review down then, but that's
absolutely. Thank you.
Date is 11th of November 2024, which
I think this might be lit. So we've got a new report template and we've updated it a little bit more to say target implementation date. I think sometimes some of the early versions it was getting misinterpreted as the date it was being signed off. And I'm wondering if that's what's happened in this one, because it was timing the date the exec signed up to report as opposed to an implementation date. Just thought that now, but we have changed our template following some feedback on that.
So what is the implementation date?
Yeah. I'll get to Rick. I'll report back to the research to discuss that massively.
That's fine.
And also also been issue with those research been that team
Thanks, guys.
Oh, you want to?
Yeah, and I guess this was where the tracking comes into play, where the data goes in the track and we include dates that the action would be completed, and then it would be followed through that mechanism there. So I think that's it.
And I think, Chair, I'm sure, and I'm sure John is, I think that it's probably worthwhile considering the narrative, the explanation in there to give us assurance that it's not just going to be, there will be outcomes and regs that are taken forward. I think you've explained the tracker, but it was there.
This one.
So this one, again, it's myself presenting it, and we're looking at the systems and controls in place to manage risks, and we did a particular focus within the medical directorate. Overall substantial assurance again, we've got a bit of a theme going on today. Again, we found lots of good practice at an organisational wide level. For example, the risk management policy is up to date, it's clear on the process for escalation and de-escalation. There's been training in terms of risk management staff. What we did find then at a more departmental and granular level is where the two findings came in. And one was in relation to the completeness of the risk register within those departments. So whilst all had them, they were in some varying formats and varying levels of completeness in terms of what we'd expect to see on there. The policy does set out a template as to what should be on the register, but that always being used. And we did find some good practice in optometry where they were using the if-then impact approach to articulate risks, which the risk management policy does set out, and they've gone a bit further on that, but that wasn't really seen in many of the risk registers that we saw. So those are our two findings, but again, say overall substantial assurance.
Comments, observations?
Chair, if I may. So a similar point to my first point, and this again is in relation to objective 2, particularly in terms of the medical greenery and the pharmacy division in terms of the risk registers, and the issue has been noted as to what the issues were that were identified. And the agreed action again is to undertake a review of all risk registers. I think for assurance of the committee, it would be useful to have clear actions that management are going to put in place, and by when, with regards to the responses. It says here that it will be by the date, the 24th of January, 2025. I'm not sure what date that now refers to in light of the previous conversation.
It was only just after Christmas we changed it, but this report I think was already in traction at that point. So yeah, that's the best confusion that day. Sorry.
I take on board there's a general theme here, so we'll take that back.
I think it would be helpful for assurance. A review to me is a little bit too abstract.
Not an exception this, because there's almost 1,000 flowers blooming, and that real lack of consistency in terms of the format, the template for this registers. Is it the intent we actually move everyone onto the same format?
I think that's what the policy sets out, is that it's done. I don't think it stipulates whether it should be in Excel or Word or whatever, but it sets out what the key fields should be. I think that the intent is there, isn't it? I think it's whether it's being followed or not.
The policy is clear that the audit identified the consistency around implementation. And I spoke to the medical director, the policy is quite clear, it's consistently applied. And my understanding is that directors, are committed to updating their registers and their basis by close.
Just one point about that sort of the comment around the agreed action and narrative in that. What's been introduced in this new reporting format is the section underneath which says expected evidence of implementation. So the idea being is that would be a clear explanation or a clear sign of what the outcome of the action should be, and so it should be quite. Word, but it should be black and white when you look at it. Yeah. So perhaps in instances it's not quite as clean cut, but that's the idea. Is that where something might not be quite as clear, you can really see what should be happening.
It should be one form of the register used throughout the organisation and the templates attached to the report.
George.
Thank you for that. Full financial systems.
Again, as I say, we are following a theme. And this report is also substantial, so it should be nice for all, isn't it? So our core financial summit this year focused on 3 areas: purchasing cards, VAT and manual payments. As I say, overall substantial. There were no recommendations made in relation to the VAT areas that we looked at, and there was a handful of recommendations in relation to purchasing cards and manual payments. The introduction of the blue box and the exec summary page does have quite a lot of bullet points of areas for improvement. So they're not areas that we've made recommendations against. Perhaps in our old style reports, these might be low priority recommendations that say areas for improvement or enhancements to the system. So there are those to take into consideration, but they didn't affect the overall opinion. The main findings are then in the main body of the report. And so we've got a few against the purchasing cards element, and again these related to the completion and retention of documentation, and I noticed the FCP for purchasing card is on the agenda later today for approval, so I think that sort of strengthens that and builds on our recommendations there. Similarly, there's a small number of recommendations related to manual payments, some data controls around authorisation processes, and again retention support. It's a bit of a theme there, really, but again I'll take the report to read and take any more detail.
Any questions? I think it's actually really good to see the revised purchasing card process on the same agenda as the audit report. I think that's one of the fastest turnarounds. Congratulations. So thank you for those. So we'll note the progress report. We've approved the draft internal audit plan, and we're noting the 3 substantial assurance internal audit reports. Thank you so much. Now we move on to Audit Wales. And over to you.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you very much for having us. So I'll take the first 2 items on the agenda and then I'll pass over to Andrew if I may. So the first item on the agenda is our regular committee update. So we don't have our finance colleagues here with us today, but just to sort of give a brief overview of the main points, I suppose. The 24-25 audit planning and risk assessment has started, and the team are already in touch with officers around early testing from a finance perspective. If we move down onto the performance audit update, obviously we're here today to present structured assessment, which is on the list. The deep dive into digital systems project brief will be out with you at the end of this month. And we are just waiting for a few comments back so we can begin our local piece of work around the value for money of commission education places. If I can draw your attention further down to Exhibit 3 and other relevant publications, you will see that there are links there to some of our national reports which have been published. And you'll see, if you click on the Cancer Services report, which is the bottom link, there are a number of recommendations in that report for different providers. And although this recommendation is not specifically for HCIW, you will see in recommendation 7 that you are mentioned as a body with whom Welsh Government should work with to implement one of their recommendations. So I just wanted to draw that to your attention. I'm happy to take any questions on the update itself.
Any questions, colleagues? Just picking up that cancer services recommendation. Is that something that we would pick up on our tractor?
From our perspective, I don't think the recommendation is for HM reviewers, and we wouldn't be trying to get against the recommendation that we made for you, but I suppose it's just about how you note it internally. And there wouldn't, we wouldn't expect to see it on track in that stuff.
And we've actually paid some attention to that report as independent members, certainly. Okay, so let's move on to the big event, the structured assessment.
Thank you very much. So this is our 2024 structured assessment report, which no doubt you'll be quite familiar with now. So it is one of the ways in which the Auditor General discharges his duty to ensure proper arrangements to secure economy, efficiency and effectiveness in the use of resources. So I'll take the report as read generally, but I will just bring your attention to a few areas. I suppose generally we'd say this is a really positive report. Our overall key finding is that the arrangements for governance, assurance, planning and financial management continue to be robust within the organisation. There are opportunities which exist to strengthen some of the arrangements further, particularly in relation to student and trainee voices, identifying and demonstrating benefit and impact of key corporate strategies and plans. I think it's fair to say that it's about refining good arrangements rather than making any arrangements good, if that makes sense. You'll see that there's been really good progress against the previous recommendations, which you'll see at the back of the report. They're all either complete, in progress, or, and I think a couple have been superseded as well. And I'll just draw your attention to the 4 new recommendations that have been made for this year. Very much decreasing in numbers, only 4 this year. And I think largely we'd say we were really happy with the organisational response which came back at each of those recommendations. The responses were practical, easy to be tracked and realistic, I'd say. So unless there's any specific questions anybody would like to discuss or ask in the report, happy to take any, Chair.
Chair, if I could just make some, so I think the report is very helpful to go through. I thought it is a good read, positive in terms of providing us as IMs and board a level of assurance. I thought it was, what I thought was interesting for me, there was 2 themes that were coming through. One was very much, as we've discussed at board, around impact and how we measure impact, and that was evident throughout. Whilst there were specific things, how do we know we're delivering against our plans, what the effect of that? So I thought that was helpful to read and for us to, I guess, gain assurance that we're on the right track in terms of our board discussions that's reflected in this type of report. I was interested to see what I would call the comments around the learner voice or the student voice. And I guess we can equate that in health board land to the patient voice and what the view of the patient is. I get where the report is coming from. It is important that that voice informs the nature of our business. But I guess for me, it's how we use that. And what does that mean in terms of our business and how we realise that voice in terms of our planning? And that's the bit I'm not sure of. And that obviously wasn't in the report. That's for us to take away. But I think for us as a committee here and in terms of the board, that is the practical bit. how do we demonstrate that, and how do we make it real in terms of the learner voice? The only other thing that I just wanted to make comment on, clearly for us as an organisation, governance is absolutely critical, and it talks about robust processes that we've got in place, and it gives us a level of assurance in terms of what we've got. But there was one comment which I thought was quite interesting, and I think it was paragraph 27, I think it was, and that was around the current resource that we've got around governance is adequate, but that perhaps going forward we need to review that. And I thought that was quite interesting in terms of how you made that decision, and how, again, going back to questions in the past, how do you benchmark that type of opinion that you've come to? From an IM perspective, governance is absolutely critical, and as a board, we've got to get that absolutely right. So I guess we need to be thinking quite carefully, what does our governance around the planning, I think it was talking, what does it look like going forward? Which is why I raised it as part of my discussions as part of the internal audit plan for next year. How do we operationalize our corporate governance, and what does good look like?
Yeah, I'm happy to come back on a few of those points if I may. So on your first point around impact, I think that is something which lots of organisations are struggling with, around the difference between outputs, outcomes, what we expecting to see. What is the difference between an output and an outcome for us? How do we measure it? But I think that's predictive, I suppose, the fact that you've got all those mechanisms in place, and it's around the added value and what that means to service users, what it means to staff. So it's about having a discussion around, okay, we've got this measure in place, we know where we want to be, but what difference will that make? And maybe finding that right at the start in the planning stage. Not always easy to measure, but I think if you know what it is you're trying to get to, then it's easier to keep an eye on if you've got there. So that's the first point, right? You know, I take your point that it's not an easy thing to do. Regarding the learner voice, this is something which has come up elsewhere. Actually, you mentioned about health boards and patient voice. I had a similar discussion with another health board where it was around, it's not enough to just have, say, a patient story. You have to think around what that slot is there to do for you. What's the purpose of the item, not the content of the item. So, as you said, what you want from it, where are you going with it? What's it looking to inform? Are there gaps that you want to fill? Is it around informing policy or strategy, or all of those things? And I think once you can identify what the slot is there to do, then I think it becomes more helpful to think about what's put in the slot in that respect. So I think that's a similar conversation which is happening elsewhere. Regarding the current resource, this came from observing, I suppose, that HIW structures have been fairly static since its inception, but obviously it's a developing organisation, and as legislation develops, you become subject to, for example, the Sustainable Development Principle and reporting. All of these extra tasks get absorbed into the organisation, and you can't necessarily pin them down by saying, oh, there's another committee, so there's clear need for more resource there. But actually, they just, people's roles and committees' roles, they just grow. So I think it's about future-proofing and saying, actually, is this role, the role of this committee or of this person, the same as it was when we started, or has it just grown and we haven't noticed it? And are we future-proofing for next short, medium, and long term? So I think it's just about keeping an eye on not just workforce planning and resilience, but around where the organisation is going and what the real tasks are.
And just a special point benchmarking, that is quite difficult to do, because a governance team with one organisation might have additional functions to another organisation. So some governance functions will have a far greater involvement in risk training, risk management, and some others don't. Some will have a separate risk department. So that's just an example, but it's very difficult to us to go, right, okay, there are the numbers there and there are numbers there. A typical health board will look like this. It's not always as straightforward as that. I suppose my observation is over the last 2 or 3 years, the governance structure here felt lean, is starting to feel a bit tight. So when we're having sort of discussions and hearing sort of the work and the workload running through the team, it feels a bit tighter now than it did a few years back.
Yeah, that's why I suggested it needed for us to better understand this. Why I'm pleased to see that it's on the audit plan for next year in terms of the operation and management of that chair, and that will help us inform and make, you know, evidence-based decisions then for that aspect of our organisation. Thank you, Chair, for a very helpful report. Thank you very much.
So I had one question, which is in fact to do with the 2023 recommendations, number 5 and 6, which are on page 732. They are actually ongoing, so either amber or red. However, they're not actually on our tracker, which I found a little concerning. Is there any reason for that, then? Should they be on the tracker?
Yeah, I guess the facing a consistent approach. So there's always a conversation in terms of what points you deem issues have been completed. So both these issues have been on our tracker, and we have determined that we, each area perspective, we have implemented them. So to not related to the IATQ. So I know that in terms of our approach, the IATQ just has not been completed yet. That's not been we know that that matter's been taken on board, so it's in there in the sense that it's completed. But I'm thinking maybe all Wales do not consider it until the INTP itself has to be finished. So
Yeah, I think on that one, it's a case of we can see the organisation starting to address the issue. There's probably a bit more to do on that. The wellbeing of future generations one was slightly different in that when we wrote the report, we were expecting the apps to come live on a particular day, and it didn't. So it got delayed. So it might have been that sort of corporately you said actually that's no longer an issue for us, or not an issue for us right now. I might just close it off. I don't know.
we have it comes through with it comes from the structure. It's come through this committee, but it's this committee that approves it that comes up. So it has been assessed by this committee as it's been completed. I do take the board, but there is a bit of grey and it's just tiny.
For me, as an audit chair, if Audit Wales are saying these are not complete, it's a bit worrying.
Yes,
Well, I mean, with the WFG one, is that basically the requirements to look at your own objectives in the context of WFG. That still exists and that still needs to be done. But you might have closed it off because for that year,
because it's corporate.
it was a different deadline that was introduced.
Yeah, I think we've had a conversation with so we've had an agreed position.
Yes, that would be lovely. Then I'd be a happy audit.
Yes,
I think that's
one version of
Yes.
I think that'll be the case as well on the evaluative in a way assessing impact of delivery, because we've got a recommendation around that, which is very similar this year as well. It probably would look quite strange if weird, but that's complete. Then made another recommendation this year, which is almost identical. So sometimes it's just around which angle you look at completeness from as well. Yeah,
Indeed. I think that conversation would be really helpful. Helping the committee understand that we've got our eyes on the things that we need to have our eyes on. Great, thank you. Annual audit report 2024.
Thank you. Today in the agenda we're including the annual audit report. It provides a summary of the work completed in the last year. It's something which I'm sure you'll be familiar with now, but basically it's a summary of work that we have already passed on to and so there shouldn't be anything in terms of surprises within the report. It includes the sort of summary narrative around the financial accounts, the unqualified audit opinion, and the minor misstatement which was adjusted in preparation of the accounts. It also includes the summary of the structured assessment messages and the financial efficiencies report. The one thing I wanted to highlight in there, it's got I can't remember which appendix it is, but it's our fee, and just to highlight that it's our intention to move one of the reviews that we had in the 24 plan into 2025. We'll cover that in the outline. But that would then do that would result in a refund, so adjust down the fee.
That review is still going to be done monthly.
Absolutely.
It's going to be done at different times.
That's going to be done at the same. So basically, it's one that Bethan was talking about earlier. So that's still continuing. So we're not changing the time frame for that. We've still got it in the plan. It's all resourced. But we were shifting it from the 24-25 into the 2025 for a couple of reasons. So one of those being we want to follow up previous report that we issued in relation to commissioning arrangements. We thought it would be better to be done and easier to be done alongside the value for money and commissioning arrangements. So there's a benefit for doing that. The other side of it for 2025 is if we weren't to do it, the mandated review across Wales. So each year we do a mandated review on use of resources. So we've done workforce management, financial efficiency into digital. The one for 2025 would be estates. And in terms of the estate risk and profile, in AGIW is very, very different to the portfolio of risk that sits within the wider NHS. So we thought it didn't make sense for us to do that work. We could do it, but it didn't make sense given the risk profile of the organisation. So we thought the best thing to do was to try to align our programme and offer a refund.
Question? Thank you. And then we've got the outline plan for 23.
So the outline plan is a very high level plan. So you'll have a detailed plan coming to the next committee. We generally issue an outline, so it allows us to actually start the planning work that we need to undertake. So it just includes our intent to undertake the financial audit and indicating the deadline for that, and also then our approach to the performance audit and the evidence of work that outlines that structured assessment, a follow-up review of the previous arrangements, then moving the value for money of education commissioning over into the 2025 plan. I think in the plan it does include our changes in our fee rate. So we went through consultation in November 2024, and at that point we were talking about 1.8%, 1.8% fee uplift. We've reduced that down to 1.7% as a result of consultation. But that, any questions on that?
Any questions on the plan?
Good to hear the reduction.
Real terms.
Thank you very much. So we the progress report, structured assessment, and the annual audit report 2024. And colleagues, are we content to approve the outline audit plan for 2025? Yes. Right. Okay, so we move on to 2.3, which is the procurement compliance report. Deborah, welcome.
Thank you, Chair. Just a short update from myself. So this is for the period from between the 10th of October to the 6th of February. We had 3 reports of a single quotation action, 2 single tender actions, 6 extensions, 4 change control notices, and during this period we've only had 1 non-compliance, and that was the file note in relation to translation services. So we're very pleased with these numbers. These are the lowest numbers that I've actually reported on for the last 2 years. So our training and the new frameworks that we've set up are working. The translation services file note, which we've recorded, won't be recordable in future because there is now a contract set up. So we're really pleased with these numbers. And again, short but sweet, but thank you very much. That's it from me.
Any questions or comments, colleagues? And I think it's really pleasing to see the impact of the training and the revised approach using frameworks, etc. I was very impressed to see how short this report was compared with previous reports.
Mm.
I was quite interested that Cardiff University's postgraduate higher education qualification appeared twice in the list, once
Yes.
as a single tender action and then as a contract extension, which was
I do believe these were actually different arrangements, which is why they appear twice. So the extension was just the that had been tendered for, so the extension was compliant, whereas the tender was outside. Sorry, the STA was outside of that process.
And what sort of arrangements do we have in place to double check that this is the only possible supplier of a particular academic programme?
So if it's a single tender action, so I think in this case, if I'm correct, I think it's related to optometry. So these were postgraduate optometry courses. And in terms of the specifications, so we would want a blended delivery, so it would need to be something that would need to be delivered in person. So when we looked at potential providers of postgraduate optometry courses, the only one was the Cardiff University. I'm trying to remember, I need to go back and look at the single tender action document, but we normally look at some sort of benchmarking pricing as well. So even if there are other suppliers there that can't deliver the service because of location, we would probably still try and look at benchmarking the prices to get some sort of assurance that we've got value for money. These relate to upskilling the primary care staff. Hopefully take on some of the policy working sessions in care, so it's part of the wider contract reform around eye care and optometry. So that's the context behind this and securing this funding from Welsh Government. But generally, in terms of single action, we would look to see who can actually provide it. And I think in this case, Cardiff University will provide it that can deliver it locally, so people can attend in person. Deborah, you may be able to correct me if I'm wrong, but I think this one we looked at, and we were going to look at whether we could develop a framework for the optometry courses.
Yes.
Some people in Wales, Cardiff University, and that locally. So it may be that going forward, if we can develop a proper framework, there may in future be more than one provider that we could procure from.
Yeah, the framework is actually in process at the moment, and we've not quite reached the end of the process yet, but hopefully within the next few months that will be in place, so there won't be a need to obviously raise any STAs or SQAs in future for optometry.
Excellent, that's really helpful, and thank you for describing the thought process and scrutiny that goes through before we arrive at a single tender action. I think that's really helpful to know.
Yeah.
Okay, well, thank you so much, Deborah.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Great progress, and keep it up.
Thank you.
Okay. So next we move to counter fraud. Henry.
Thank you, Chair. So I just pick out some key points in the report. So it covers the period the 24th of September until the 23rd of January.
continue to work on our infrastructure and our SharePoint page. Please take a look. Thank you. Our fraud awareness is going really quite well, I think. We've given talks, 7 sessions, reached 280 staff so far. There are another 2 sessions, one on the 11th and one on the 19th. So if you haven't seen those, then please ask and I'll share it further. I do hope to get that onto ESR so that we can provide compliance figures moving forward, but that's going to take a little bit of work for the systems to get set up, and then also we need to input all the people that we're putting it to. So fingers crossed that will come moving forward. Bursary talks was another one that fell in this period for the cohorts that started in Agored with on 1st of October, so that was now 96 students there. And we had International Fraud Awareness Week, which fell within that all the time. There was some documents placed online and shared, trying to promote that. The bulletins and intelligence, anything that's come in was shared, no specific risks were actually identified, but it has been shared and gone through. And there was a procurement exercise which was done looking at due diligence and contract management. We completed that with a caveat that it was put in place by the Capital Authority in England, mainly focused at how their systems are set up over there. So it, we've done our side and we've complied with that request that they sent out. We didn't find any issues that came about from our checks, but when they come back with the national review and message picked out, we will review that and see if anything might be applicable here and then from that. NFI now, all the matches are there, and at the moment there are 54 matches. There were some new matches released quite recently. I don't think any were additional, but so I was going to JW, but we intend to go through all of those matches. I will provide an update as we move along to get progress on that. Referrals and investigations are no investigations. The referrals generally relate to the intelligence and the work that was there, and just to cover that. And still, no significant salary payments to come through to us, which is great to see. And that's but happy to take any questions.
Questions from Henry? It's progress.
Just a comment and a question. It's very pleasing to see the amount of 280 staff trained. So I think that's commendable to the organisation and to the team for supporting us. I guess my question linked to that is, what's the timeline for completion, and when are we going to be satisfied that we've reached a threshold now and then it's just refresher?
So I think the target is generally was 80-85% when program management. Yeah, about that level is minimal when we start looking at having it all on there. I will keep running sessions until the keep going. But I'm hopeful that if we can get the traction and find that people's a bit of a struggle for a few staff members who maybe are have less sessions that they work, so trying to time that up and get them to match in has been a little struggle. So I imagine that we'll have a small percentage that maybe a bit of a longer term matching them in, and I'd like to think by the end of the financial year would be pretty much there, and hopefully I can get those figures so you'll be able to track it a lot more with the percentages by that point. Online.
The progress on training is really pleasing to see, because it's quite a turnaround, and thanks to you and to executive for making sure it's actually happening.
Just very briefly, I think the approach that we've tried to take here is to build it into 50 sort of directory team meetings, so we've got a bit more of a captive audience. It does mean you can actually deliver the training to a number of people at one time. So I think we said previously we would try this approach and then perhaps review it for after the first year to see if we think it's working in terms of achieving the high level compliance that we need, but also in terms of the delivery, the nature of the delivery. So probably capturing some feedback from staff about how they found the sessions as well. It's more than just taking advance. Actually, if people have received the training and taken it in, and perhaps hopefully behave differently as a result of it, and that's key. Yeah.
I have one question, which is about salary payments and the expectation that significant salary payments are important to Canterbury. And in your report, Henry, you say that there were no significant payments. In the losses and special payments paper, which is the next paper, there are clearly a number of overpayments falling in financial year. Do they not reach the significant?
Yeah, so the significant level is the one that was agreed across Wales and with the workforce and everyone, was that anything that had gone on for longer than 3 months and it was more than £5,000, and they haven't been in contact with ourselves for any. We cover those points, so if it's only happened in 1 month that someone gets paid significant salary, if we go over that £5,000 mark in 1 month, but straight away they phoned us and said we can get it sorted. So they wouldn't come to us yet. And nothing that I know about, unless it's something that hasn't come through the system for anyone to met those thresholds.
Headland, but I don't think about it over 5k, and it was a bit large one, which we paid within a month. So it wouldn't met that threshold.
That's really helpful. Just trying to understand and make sense of the criteria we apply. Okay, well, thank you very much for the report, Henry. We now move on to losses and special payments.
Thank you very much. So this is a standard report we bring to each committee. For 24-25, all such payments have been related to the overpayments of salaries as put on the paper. I have included information back to 1st April 2022 because there are still some older ones outstanding that we are still working through, and again, not that level, they are smaller. This paper was written a few weeks ago, just some updates. We have actually recovered a further 5,200 since the last paper, and £1,500 was credited as it was actually an incorrect calculation by payroll. So actually there's only 4,200 outstanding at this point. There are some older ones. We are pursuing. We've had some information from the debt collection issue over the past week, so we'll consider those and the next steps on those individuals before the end of the financial year, make a decision on how we proceed with those. We've got a couple of options we are looking at, and we have agreed with producing an annual report at the audit committee, setting more detailed information on trends. I think John, you requested that previously, so that will come to the next audit committee just to show where the issues are and we'll respond to those. So yeah, there's no significant ones, and we're currently only 4,000 outstanding at this point, and it is an admin burden, but we are on top of it, and hopefully the committee can see that.
And really good progress.
Thanks.
Actually.
Good to see the
To know that we're chasing the money.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you very much, members. We asked to note that, so we do. And then a review on standing orders.
Yeah, diolch yn fawr iawn, Cadeirydd. Papur yn ystyried diwygiadau i'r Cyngor Sefydlog ydi hwn. Felly o ran cefndir, mae'r pwyllgor taliadau a thelenau gwasanaeth yn ei gorats wedi adolygu eu cylch gorchwylio un o'n mis Sicrwydd. Mae'r pwyllgor yn awgrymu newid o ran ei cylch gorchwylio, a hynny'n gwneud gyda galluogi'r pwyllgor i gymeradwyo unigolion i cael ystyried ar gyfer y system amaderau. Yn unol â'r Cyngor Sefydlog, mae'r gwrthodedd gan y pwyllgor yma i ystyried a craffu unrhyw newid i'r Cyngor Sefydlog yn cael ei cynnig gan y bwrdd. Felly, yn gofyn y slot yma, dwi'n ystyried y setnau diwygiad thanks, but whereas we have got both his mouth in Mark, we get there, it's just what she got to.
We've seen these at the Rats Committee. Are we prepared to accept and to recommend the revised version to the board in its next meeting on the 27th of March? One said yes, before she left. Okay, thank you very much. Right, making good progress with the agenda. We only need to run 10 minutes behind time, so that's not bad. So we'll now take a 10-minute break. Or 5-minute break? 10 minutes. Fine. Thank you very much.